It's time to make some excuses for these fighters that showed up incredibly compromised and didn't have their best performances because of it. That's right. We're going to be discussing the most compromised fighters in recent UFC history. These are guys that showed up with maybe an injury, staph infection, maybe something happened during fight week, maybe they were woken up in the middle of the night. There's a bunch of things that could happen. Some of these guys, they show up looking blind as a bat, pale as a ghost, weak as a cardboard box. And I thought I would put together a list of our favorite compromised fighters. Some of these are mythical fighters, but let's get into this. First person on this list, number 1, we got Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 2 Melatonin Gate. Volkanovski, a lot of you guys don't know this. This was the second fight with Max, the competitive of the 3 fights that they had, the one that was actually pretty competitive. A lot of you guys might not know this, but Alexander Volkanovski got woken up 4 hours before he was scheduled to wake up. And remember, this was in Abu Dhabi, which means that at the time, because they wanted to broadcast the fight in a U.S.-friendly manner for the U.S. fans, all of these fighters had to fight at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Volk was scheduled to wake up at like 4 a.m. to head to the arena. 4 hours before he's scheduled to wake up, USADA, the drug testing company, knocks on his door and needs a sample from him. Volkanovski couldn't get back to sleep, and he had to pound melatonin pills, and he said that he felt so groggy that he was drunk. Volkanovski said he was drunk as a skunk. Here's a video of him saying he was drunk as a skunk.
That second fight with Max, when I tell you I didn't turn up, there's a few things that happened. We obviously know about USADA coming and waking me up 4 hours before I had to get up, which is ridiculous. Don't know how that happened and how that could happen. I'm over that. But I mean, I end up doing silly things as well. I took like melatonin tablets thinking it was just silly. And then I woke up like drunk. Not drunk, but like, So it was rough.
So this guy's waking up sleep deprived. He's getting a couple hours of sleep, which fucking sucks. Anyone that's ever been sleep deprived, they know how much that stinks. And he's groggy because of the melatonin. Volk was saying he felt drunk. And it just so happens that that's the only time Volkanovski had a very close fight with Max Holloway. He got dropped a couple times. I mean, imagine being sleep deprived and having to fight a guy that you can't finish, that has unstoppable cardio, unstoppable volume, and you still pull it out. 3, 4, 5. 3, 4, 5. Volk was saying, man, bring the heat. Bring the heat. Wasn't saying, no, bring the heat that night, because Max Holloway was knocking his ass all over the octagon. And sleepy Volk, sleep-deprived Volk off of the melatonin, still pulls it out the bag. Volkanovski was blind as a bat, pale as a ghost, drunk as a skunk, and he was able to make the adjustments on the fly. Not at his best that night. A little bit chinny. I mean, dude, imagine taking an uppercut off of 2 hours of sleep and some melatonin. That'll fuck you up. Let's get on to the next one. Oliveira in Abu Dhabi. Compromised. Now, not in the way that you would think. He's not necessarily injured. He's not necessarily got staph. But it's a mental thing. Oliveira, some people say that they still can hear him quaking in his boots. Oliveira in Abu Dhabi is a very on-edge, paranoid, shivery type of guy. You know, we call guys like Mr. Quivers. Mr. Quivers, Oliveira's Mr. Quivers 2.0 when you put him in Abu Dhabi. He's quivering, he's shaking, he's looking around, he's got his head on a swivel. He's paranoid. He's got the Brazilian gospel music tuned up to another notch. Not because he wants to hype himself up, but just because he's trying to tune out the noise of the brothers. Right? You got Islam Makhachev and Habib putting their finger up, walking around the hallways. You got these guys talking smack. The brothers were making fun of him. And Oliveira, you know, he's one of these guys where he's humble. And he doesn't want to hurt a fly. He's just here to fight. He's here to show up. Why even talk shit? Come on. What are you doing? Don't talk shit. Come on. What are we doing? We're not immature. But Islam Makhachev likes to talk shit. And he does it in a competitive manner. He doesn't get personal. But he's calling Charles Oliveira a tapper. And he's calling him a quitter. And that's not necessarily personal. That's just talking about past fights. And Oliveira, you could see the lips quivering. And he's got like 20 guys around him. He's paranoid. It's like the walls are closing in. The walls were closing in on Oliveira. He was uncomfortable. It's like taking an animal out of its natural environment, out of its natural habitat, and putting it in a sterile room. It's just not, doesn't know what to do. Oliveira was like one of those animals. It's like, this ain't Oliveira's happy place. You know, you got to put Oliveira out there in the United States where everyone loves him. right? You got to put him out there in Brazil where everyone loves him. Now he's got Islam Makhachev and Habib, and he's got the brothers snickering at him in the hallways, right? You got the Makhachev walking around with his finger up like this, man. Brother, this guy got no grappling, brother. He talk about jiu-jitsu, brother. He got tapped 10 times, brother. That's the thing, man. Because this guy, going into this, he had the craziest aura I've ever seen. No one's had better aura or crazier aura than Charles Oliveira the night of beating Justin Gaethje. Nobody. I don't care who it is. Conor McGregor at his peak? No. All right? Here's the hand behind the back, McGregor. I don't give a fuck. Charles Oliveira destroying Justin Gaethje is the peak of aura in MMA. All right? Not John Jones, not McGregor. The aura was short-lived, though, because as soon as he got to Abu Dhabi, it was missing. Straight up. Let's get on to the next one. Benoit Saint Denis versus Dustin Poirier. As soon as I saw this photo of Benoit Saint Denis on the first episode of Embedded for UFC 299, I knew that something was up. Something was messed up. Benoit Saint Denis showing up on Fight Week with a full-blown volcano on his forehead. And not only did I know right away that it was staph infection, but people were denying it all week because, of course, they knew that if this dude had staph and he didn't perform that well and he lost, that people were going to make excuses. And that's exactly what they did, because they should. Benoit Saint Denis beat the dog shit out of DP. He beat the dog shit out of DP. And he gassed out after 5 minutes. This is a guy that was known for his cardio. Yet after 5 minutes, having his way with Dustin Poirier, no adversity whatsoever, this man stands up like he just did a 3-hour squat workout with David Goggins after running a marathon, and DP just pops right back up. So Benoit Saint Denis gasses out badly after 5 minutes, unheard of, all right? And then he gets caught in the second round because his defense is a little bit suspicious. And I know that people were saying, dude, staph won't cause bad defense, but getting tired actually makes it harder to defend yourself. Getting tired makes it harder to hold your hands up. It makes you more likely to make a dumb decision in the octagon. I mean, we all know this. It makes your chin weaker. And taking antibiotics to recover from staph infection will absolutely fuck your gas tank. Benoit Saint Denis, volcano on his forehead, blind as a bat, pale as a ghost. Benoit Saint Denis was gassed after 5 minutes. I don't want to hear it. Staffgate. Next up, we have the reason why Aljamain Sterling isn't that close to being the bantamweight GOAT. It's because one of his title wins was against a one-armed man. Now, that one-armed man wasn't only just an old head, wasn't only getting put in wheelchairs on people's thumbnails in the build-up to this fight because he was an old head, because he was coming off of a damaging loss where it was so damaging, him and Corey Sandhagen, he had to take a year out of the cage. I think he had to get surgery. And not only did he have to get surgery, but TJ Dillashaw's arm fell off about 30 times in his training camp. Still showed up, and a lot of people are going to say, dude, mad respect to TJ, mad respect for showing up, man. This was one of those injuries where everyone hates him for showing up because his arm dislocated right off the bone, right out of the shoulder socket, okay? This shit came out of his fucking shoulder socket within the first exchange, and Aljamain Sterling still took 2 rounds to finish him, which is pretty crazy. But either way, Aljamain Sterling fought a one-armed old head for his first ever title defense. I know people act like it was a second title defense. Dude, I'm tired of the fucking way people talk about Aljamain Sterling's title reign. All right? He lost to Jan. I don't care if you're not even going to count that. The first fight, you can't count that as a win. So his first title win ever was against Jan. This was his title defense. Hardly means anything. I don't care what anyone says. And, you know, it's actually kind of ironic that Aljo talks about O'Malley fighting him when he wasn't really ready for the fight. Dude, this is his first title defense. It's probably the worst title defense anyone could possibly ever get, to be honest. Not his fault. Again, TJ Dillashaw should have pulled out and let someone else step in. Outside of that, Aljo has what? A win over Cejudo, so he has 2 title wins. A win over Cejudo and a win over Peter Yan. Of course, he's got a win over Corey Sandhagen and Pedro Munoz back in the day, but a win over TJ Dillashaw and 2 wins over Yan, don't even start. Okay, he doesn't have 2 wins over Yan. He doesn't have a win over TJ. He's got a win over an old head, one-armed man. On to the next one. Fat Volk coming off of the couch, short notice, taking this fight on like 8 days notice, off of arm surgery. All right, so not only was Volk fat, but he was coming off of an arm surgery, which people tend to forget, man. Because everyone's like, dude, he was kind of out of shape and all that. I remember when this fight was first announced, people were saying, Volk must know something. He's probably been getting ready. Dude, he was fat as fuck with a brace on his arm. Like, when has Volkanovski ever been this out of shape? And look at the weight cut. I mean, he looked horrible after cutting the weight. That definitely didn't do him any wonders. Had no confidence on the night of. It was just pure delusion that he was running off of, trying to go into this fight, probably hyping himself up all week. But Volkanovski, as soon as he got in the cage, had no confidence because he's the preparation guy. Volkanovski's always talking about how, you know, he trains specifics, and that's what gives him confidence, that he's putting himself in positions that other guys aren't putting themselves in training camp. He's training 10 times harder than all these hungry guys that are trying to climb that mountain. But not this time. Volk gets in there, poops his pants, unable to pull the trigger, and gets head kicked in the first round, gets totally shown up. And it's a good win for Makhachev, but mentally unstable in the cage, drinking in the offseason, coming off of an arm surgery, super fat, horrible weight cut. I mean, you may as well have been blind as a bat. Volkanovski got in there, probably didn't even know where he was, right? He basically taken a fat dude off of the street, giving him a couple cardio kickboxing lessons, and putting him in there in front of Islam Makhachev. You can't tell me this wasn't a compromised fighter. And I remember, though, I mean, these freaking Volk has a trick up his sleeve, people. Like 3 days after Volkanovski accepts the fight, there was a narrative that Volk had been preparing, which is just insanely delusional. Would Volkanovski have done better in the rematch if it weren't for this? Absolutely yes. Does he win? I don't know. I don't think necessarily. I don't think so, because Makhachev would be in Abu Dhabi anyway. And when Makhachev's in Abu Dhabi, the guy's built different. But you got to think of Volkanovski, the lack of him pulling the trigger, that's definitely going to have to be attributed to the circumstances of him not being prepared. Because fighters always discuss how if you're not prepared for a fight, it's going to hit you like a train in the back room, in the warm-up room before you warm up. And it was probably hitting Volkanovski pretty hard while he was warming up in the back room, while he was walking out in the fight itself. So really upset that he took that. Next up, we have Islam Makhachev. Blind as a bat, pills a ghost versus Dustin Poirier, showing up at Staph. I knew something was up this week, right? Because we saw the Staph infection. Islam Makhachev and his face, he looked like he was holding a lot of water too. Because I'd been seeing a lot of interviews with him throughout fight week, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what's going on with his face, but his head is just really bloated, which is weird. There's something going on with the way that he was holding water. He was literally pale as fuck, had this staph infection on his leg, and when he's out there fighting Dustin Poirier, he takes him down easily in the first round. His striking looked good, his chin looked good, but dude, that first couple of takedown attempts that Dustin Poirier shucked off, those first couple ones that he stuffed, you just knew Islam Makhachev was weak as hell. Islam Makhachev looked extremely weak in this fight. Shooting takedowns, getting a bunch of them stuffed, still able to push a crazy pace, still able to look for the finish the entire fight, which is just insane. He's been blind as a bat, pills a ghost a couple of his fights, but this one particularly, I mean, there were moments where Islam Makhachev's corner was trying to get him a cane, right? Because he couldn't see in the octagon, but he still was able to pull it off against an old gritty crafty vet like DP. Of course he finishes him in the first round without Staph, but you know how it goes, DP and Staph. Now, how would he do if he wasn't compromised going into this? Well, he did take Poirier's back early, so that's basically the most dominant position for Islam Makhachev to have over Dustin Poirier, and he couldn't get the submission, and at that point it's not really a strength thing, getting someone's back and from there choking them out. It's more of like a finesse thing, out hand fighting them. So I don't even know if he finishes him in the first round when he takes his back, but maybe he's got a little bit more pop on his shots, right? Maybe he gets him out of there in the third rather than the fifth. You never know. But either way, blind as a bat, dude. This guy couldn't see in between rounds. They had to give him a cane. Next up, we've got the quick turnaround McGregor heading into the trilogy with Dustin Poirier. What do you know? Another Poirier opponent showing up compromised. Now, to be fair, McGregor didn't snap his shin in half in the rematch, but very special circumstances. And this is the thing that people need to understand when it comes to a McGregor fight. It's always a bit of a special circumstance these days because, you know, most UFC fighters, they're always training, they're always conditioning, right? They're always hitting the pads, they're always hitting the heavy bag, they're always sparring. Conor McGregor didn't even know what a calf kick was going into this fight because a couple of them and he was thinking about that yacht outside. And here's the photo of McGregor on the yacht, thinking, thank goodness I finally got to the yacht. But McGregor, and dude, you got to respect this about him, and I'm being serious right now. You have to respect the fact that he wanted to take the rematch only 6 months later, because 6 months for McGregor is like the equivalent of a 1 month turnaround for any other fighter. Probably less. It's like the equivalent of Khamzat Chimaev fighting week after week back in the day in 2020. But compromised, coming off of a brutal beatdown where his leg was all bubbled up. And again, this is McGregor taking calf kicks, and you gotta kind of remember he was preparing for Manny Pacquiao, and he was thinking, man, I beat Khabib up for a round, and I knocked out Eddie Alvarez. P-Head Poirier, who at the time didn't have the same aura that he had after these McGregor fights, had decent aura, but you get my point. At the time, no one was picking Dustin. A lot of people were saying this is a tune-up fight for Conor. This is a tune-up fight for him. He's going to land that left hand and put Dustin away, and he did really well. But again, a couple calf kicks that McGregor wasn't taking against the Bellator Kansan training camp, and we saw him on the yacht a couple hours later. Now, the thing is, he showed up 6 months later, and his leg was bothering him during that training camp. So not only was his leg totally messed up and probably injured, I don't know exactly what sort of injury, but it was totally fucked up after the rematch. Now he's in training, now he's sparring, now he's checking kicks, and he's throwing kicks, and he's dealing with kicks. First round, his leg snaps in half. Now, I know that this fight showed us a lot. I mean, some people say it didn't. Conor McGregor was getting his ass beat in the first round. Had like 40 seconds of success. Then Poirier took him down, beat him up on the ground, which is pretty crazy. But, I mean, you do have to be honest. You can't really count that as like a super clean win for Dustin. I mean, Conor's leg literally snapped in half. Had one of the most gruesome injuries we've ever seen. Only Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman have had injuries like that in the UFC. So, yeah, I mean, you got to say McGregor's leg was compromised going into this, as was shown when he snapped his leg in half. And that's why I'm really worried for him against Michael Chandler. So let's get on to the next one. Rushed Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley. Now, I know Sean O'Malley also got injured in the build-up to this. He had a rib injury during sparring, and he couldn't grapple for like 4 weeks leading up to this. But Aljamain Sterling was coming off of a 5-rounder against Henry Cejudo, right? A whole training camp to prepare for Henry Cejudo. And this is bantamweight Aljo. Now he's at featherweight, so the weight cut is always brutal for the guy. 5 rounds with Henry Cejudo, a hard-fought 5 rounds, beating each other up. And now Aljamain Sterling has to fight Sean O'Malley, and the UFC's gaslighting him and they're pressuring him. And at the end of the day, it was his decision. You know what I mean? And O'Malley had a fucked up rib, and you're the one that signed the contract. And I know a lot of people were saying, poor Aljo, but dude, this is the guy that signed the contract. Now his teammates, apparently Aljamain Sterling, I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but apparently his teammates and his coaches pushed him to take this fight, which is just ridiculous. I mean, Aljamain Sterling, I don't know who's in your circle or who you're necessarily referring to when you're saying your teammates and your coaches are pushing you to take this fight. You should have never have taken this fight. We were all warning Aljamain Sterling, but hey, people around him, I guess that wasn't the case. Either way, and then you got to fight Sean O'Malley 2.5 months later. You got to cut weight again. And I remember Aljamain ballooned up after the O'Malley fight because he was still in that deciding phase. Should I fight him? Should I not? So he balloons up. He gains like 30 pounds, 35 pounds, maybe even 40, gets super fat, and then he has to take all the weight off while being injured, while going into the fight. His chin was probably worse than ever before. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying he lost to O'Malley because he was rushed. I mean, O'Malley did set him up with a perfect shot. O'Malley was also compromised going into this. So both guys are compromised. We'll say that. Both guys are compromised. O'Malley's rib, Aljamain Sterling being rushed. So I guess it kind of evens out, but Aljo's kind of the main focal point of this one just because of that documentary that came out recently. So I wanted to include him on this list. But anyway, that is it for this video. Let me know in the comments what your favorite compromised fighter is. Until next time.